5 touchdowns for Phil Jurkovec in a historic performance as Boston College defeats Georgia Tech 41-30. We're going to have a full analysis of what was one of the most exciting games of the season for the Eagles. All of this and more on today's Locked On Boston College. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black, 6-4 Boston College stands after defeating Georgia Tech on Saturday, 41-30. With me, I'm going to kick it off and do a little bit differently today. Mitch Wolfe is going to join us in the first couple segments to talk about the football game. Mitch, how's it going?
Going good. This was one of the best BC games in a little while in terms of completeness and just being an exciting game. Unfortunately, I did not get to see it live because I was at a live football game, but watching it back, it was a really impressive game from all involved, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we saw, we've been waiting this season, we didn't get to see much of it, was a dominant performance from Phil Jurkovec. 3 touchdowns on the ground, 2 in the air, 5 total. He threw for over 300 yards, He ran for 70. Mitch, what was your analysis of what was one of the most impressive quarterback performances I've ever seen out of a Boston College quarterback?
Right. I mean, I was trying to go back through some stats, try to find some analogs for this kind of performance. And first of all, as a runner, I can't find the last time a Boston College quarterback ran for 3 touchdowns. Not even Tyler Murphy did that. So it's at least the first time it's been done this century. It might be the most touchdowns by a quarterback rushing in a single game in Boston College history. I'd have to do more research, but I mean, throwing the ball, he was also fantastic. I mean, so based on the PFF numbers, so he had 12 completions. Every single one of them went for a first down, which makes sense given that his average depth of target was 19.2 yards. So, it's not that he's just, throwing the ball and, they're completing passes. He's throwing the ball into the deep and intermediate area of the field. And that's what's really unlocking this offense, which is what we've have said is missing, while he was gone. And only 5 of his 19 attempts were shorter than 10 yards down the field. So he was just bombing it deep the whole game, which you love to see. And the receivers really came through for him. I'm kind of in the process of writing my 3 stars of the weekend. I really couldn't pick just one receiver because based on their statistics too and how they performed, they all had great games. So, really great to see this offense really just have a complete game to get this Saturday.
So from the BC Sports Information Department, I don't have anything on the 3 touchdowns. However, Jurkovec became just the second BC quarterback in school history to throw for 2 touchdowns and run for 2 touchdowns in an ACC game. He threw for 237 and 2 touchdowns in the first half while rushing for 34 and 2 in the second half. He joins Chris Crane in 2008 as the only other person in an ACC game. And then Patrick Tolles did it against Wagner, which doesn't really count.
Yeah.
So that was that. But speaking of the rushing attempts, what really impressed me with Jurkovec in his run, and Halfley talked about it a little bit on Sunday, was he looked faster. Something about him, the way he was moving, he looked more explosive. He looked quicker. I think it was Emma Healy that asked. He looked thinner too. He looks like he's taken off a little weight. I think Jurkovec even mentioned it at one of his press conferences. He looks like a different like a much more confident, polished quarterback in just the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of seen that little bit of a narrative floating around recently about him kind of taking some weight off. I don't really know when, but I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I hadn't really thought of that. But I mean, yeah, he looks absolutely incredible as a runner. He's moving really well in the open field. I think there was actually some talk when he was still at Notre Dame that because I think he was frustrated he wasn't getting playing time. So he's like, listen, I'll switch to tight end or wide receiver just so I can get on the field. And, I think as such a great athlete as he is, that would have ultimately been a disappointing position change, but it's something that he could have done, just to get some playing time.
Yeah. And, Jurkovec, I think we have 2 more games. It'll be interesting to see if against, Florida State's an athletic team. They're better than Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's defense, we knew going into this was going to struggle against the pass. They struggled against the pass. Mm-hmm. And Wake Forest, they're a sieve. They look like a sieve against NC State again. And there's a possibility that Jurkovec could end this season really hot.
Right. And I've said to you and a lot of people that I don't think he will declare at the end of this season, but I mean, if he puts out 2 more performances to this level and maybe even improves as a passer, not that there's that much room to improve, but I would start getting a little worried because, if he comes back next year, there's a chance he gets hurt again, misses a lot of time. And, if he decides to play the bowl game and, has another great performance, then, he's like, hey, listen, I'm riding a 5-game streak where I've been awesome. I'm going to capitalize right now. And I think, if he puts out two or three more performances like this, I think that he's, a top 100 pick lock.
Yeah.
I know a lot of BC fans don't really want to hear this offseason, but I don't think that, I hope that doesn't happen either.
And the worst part of all that is, as we've said, Mitch, and I know you cover the draft stuff more, is this is a really bad.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Quarterback class.
Yeah.
If he does that, ends the season strong, and then goes to the combine and does really well, he could shoot up draft boards pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, and he would probably perform well at the combine just because of how athletic he is. But it's funny because I was talking with somebody about this, and to compare it to somebody in the last year's draft, it's kind of like, so Davis Mills was a quarterback from Stanford who was kind of a late riser. But he hadn't had much playing time. I think he had only played in 18 games in a few years at Stanford. And I think Phil would kind of have that similar trajectory, but Jurkovec has immensely more physical talent as a thrower and as a runner than Mills had, just in his ability to throw the ball down the field, to create out of structure and do all that kind of stuff. So, and Mills went at the top of the third round. So, I think that would be Jurkovec's floor if he were to declare. So he could be a second, maybe even. I think this would be pushing it, but maybe even a late first round pick.
All right. And let's wrap up our talk about the offensive side of the ball. About another group that I thought did incredible was the offensive line. There were times when Jurkovec went back to pass, and the pocket that he had, you could drive a car through, because it felt like for the second straight week, we saw it against Virginia Tech, we saw it against Georgia Tech, that offensive line just beat the crap out of the defense.
Yeah. And I mean, to take that with a grain of salt, Virginia Tech has some very talented defensive linemen. I would say Georgia Tech doesn't really have that. And like you say, the defense isn't very good. So you do have to take BC's performance with a grain of salt. But with that being said, I mean, they didn't allow any sacks. I'm only counting, I think it said that Phil was only pressured 6 times on 20 dropbacks. So that's not very much. And obviously he has the athleticism to get out of the pocket and buy time. But yeah, I mean, looking at the PFF grades, I mean, they're all excellent for all the offensive linemen, especially as pass blockers. It wasn't like the best running game for BC relative to some of their other performances, but they got the job done. Garwo got over 100 yards again. Obviously Phil had a great day running the ball. But I mean, yeah, you're just seeing this offense really reach its apotheosis of getting to what we all expected and what we wanted out of this offense going into this season.
And just as a point, you brought up Pro Football Focus. Phil Jurkovec was named about an hour ago. 7 p.m. He was named Pro Football Focus's Offensive Player of the Week.
Yeah, I went back and looked this. So his offensive grade was the 21st best, tied for 21st best single game performance of any quarterback this season that started the game.
Wow. And I just assumed, I saw Malik Cunningham had 5 touchdowns too. So I was just assuming they're going to skip over Jurkovec to go right to him, but they didn't. So congratulations to Phil. Now, in a moment, we're going to look at the defense, a group that I thought started off really poorly and then improved as the game went along. And you know what else is improved and is really nice? You got to check it out, is PrizePicks. All right, college football fans, have you heard about PrizePicks? It's a daily fantasy football fantasy site made easy. I love this, and I know you will too. It is a leader in college sports daily fantasy. It offers more college football props than anyone in the world and offers all the star players of the Power 5 as well as mid-majors you may not have even heard of. They offer props, anything you could think of, from yards to touchdown, even interceptions thrown. On Saturday, I went on PrizePicks and I looked up Phil Jurkovec, and his over-under was 192. And I think you probably did that by halftime, and you would have won if you played on PrizePicks. All of you that do this, make sure that you sign up and use promo code Locked On, and you're going to get 100% deposit match up to $100. You can pick 2 to 5 players, the over under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on an entry. I've been playing this more and more as the weeks go on. It is a lot of fun. You have to check it out. They allow mixed sports entries. You could pick, Patrice Bergeron of the Bruins and LeBron James, all in the same entry. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawal. Don't hesitate. Check out PrizePicks and use promo code Locked On. Head on over and play. It's fun, it's easy, and you can win. Head on over to PrizePicks. It's daily fantasy made easy. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here. Thank you all for listening to our show. If you are listening to this as your first listen every morning, thank you all. If you don't, I want to encourage you to make Locked On Boston College your daily listen when you're heading into work or cooking dinner or going for a walk with your dog. It's usually 20 to 30 minutes, and it's all the BC news that you need. Now, we talked at length, Mitch and I, about Phil Jurkovec in the first segment and his historic play, 5 touchdowns. And he single-handedly won that game for BC. Every touchdown that was scored was on his hands or on his legs. They did that. And the reason it was tough was because the defense and special teams struggled at times. Mitch, I want to hear you. You look at the X's and O's sometimes. What was your overall take from the play of the defense?
So I want to actually just address the special teams thing first, because I think it's a little more complex, but you can kind of put it out there and be done with it. So I think that, they allowed the kick return touchdown on Georgia Tech's first opportunity, and that sucks. And that happens sometimes. But it seems like there was some weird moving parts about who was being the kickoff specialist this week, and then just missing those kicks. They made the change back to Longman halfway through the game. And then they were kind of just squib kicking and stuff. So that helps Georgia Tech's offense with giving them a lot of short fields. And so that's part of it, something we have to consider. With that being said, I still think this was a pretty good performance from the defense overall, because again, if you take into account them getting short fields, that's going to hurt them. But they also were able to clamp down and make some really important plays at big times. And, we saw Georgia Tech get out to a 21-7 lead pretty quickly. And, we've seen that happen with BC sometimes this year, where they have these plays that kind of snowball and then it gets away from them and they end up losing the game. But this time, with Phil in, you have the offense still humming. You get the defense some confidence where they can actually come out and get some stops, get some turnovers. So, all of that is great to see. I'm just looking at the drive chart now. And, so they have those first few touchdowns, BC has a fumble that gives them good field position. They get a touchdown off that. But then, for the most of the middle part of the game, BC was forcing punts. They got turnovers on downs. They were forcing field goals, got an interception in the red zone. And then, they're getting those key stops, especially in the red zone, when they're needed most. And that's something that Jeff Hafley's talked about a lot is, there are times when you give up yards and, the other team is pretty good. Like you'll give up points sometimes, but when it really matters, can you come through and get the stop? And I think for the most part, the defense is able to do that.
Yeah. It seems like, if you really look after those first 2 drives where they really struggled, it was punt, downs, halftime, field goal, interception, touchdown, fumble, end of game. Like they really struggled those first 2 drives. One of them, was a punt. Yeah. So it was a punt to a touchdown. So they really only had a couple of bad drives in this game. I thought they played really well. What really impressed me was, for anyone with eyes, you watch this game, Jordan Yates could not throw a football effectively. He's not a good. Go ahead.
I would say the thing that I noticed about him is, I think you mentioned this to me as well, is that, he never really could throw from a pocket. Like they had to get him rolling out. They had to have him throw on the move on kind of these funky design plays. And, I'll give him credit. Like he's a very good athlete. And they are getting the ball to athletes like Jahmyr Gibbs in space. But eventually, like when the chips are kind of down, you have to make plays. Like you have to be able to throw from the pocket. And that's just something he really wasn't able to do consistently.
And I thought BC did a great job of really getting to him when he was in the pocket.
Right. And that's something that BC has not, really been able to do consistently, is be able to get pressure, especially on a mobile quarterback. They've been able to kind of flush guys like, Malik Cunningham and Garrett Schrader out, but then they've kind of burned them with their legs. And that's something you're afraid of with Yates. But this time they were able to kind of actually hem him in, get some big sacks, which was great to see.
And I think of that last sack. I think we were talking about it on, Mitch was saying earlier that he'd watched the game later because he was at the Ohio State game, and I had watched it already. And I think I was watching Wake and NC State while he was watching it. Mm-hmm. It was that last sack.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about what you saw in that play? Because that was a really one of the best quarterback pressures I think I've seen BC throw at a quarterback this year.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, I think that's kind of a funky play because you got them at 3rd and long, if I remember correctly. And they actually bring the pressure from the outside corner, which bringing outside corner blitzes is pretty rare just because obviously you're leaving receivers kind of by themselves with a deeper zone defender. So bringing that kind of blitz is pretty risky, but I think that's something, and Hafley's talked about this, is Lukabu has a really good sense of like when to call the right pressure. And that's kind of a weird thing to say, especially from somebody like me who like kind of wants to look more at like analytic stuff and process as opposed to just, her heuristics and hunches. But, their ability to kind of, he's like, all right, this time I'm going to call it like it's going to work because of these reasons, and bring that unexpected pressure is a big reason why BC was actually able to get some good pressures this game.
Yeah. And, there was a great sack by Horsley. I was just impressed, especially as the second half, once that game became that Jordan Yates had to beat you with his arm and it was no longer, you try to spring Jahmyr Gibbs over and over again. The game was over. It just seemed like that game was going to end. And the play of the game, I think, on defense had to be, that obviously that big sack, but Jaden Woodby with the interception right near the end zone. That was a heck of a catch by him. In a big moment.
Yeah, that's great awareness from a guy who's like still a relatively young player and like relatively new to this team. But I mean, I'm going to feature him in my 3 stars article because I think he's brought, you have guys like Marcus Valdez, who's kind of a quieter guy, but like leads by example, really kind of a big, tough guy. But I think having a guy like Jaden Woodbay, who's kind of a more, your Energizer bunny, your guy who's kind of has just a more high tempo, high motor kind of player. Just, he's talking to guys, gets their spirits up, kind of reminds me of guys like Dominique Williams or like Will Harris from defenses in years past that is kind of the vocal leader of the defense. Whereas a guy like maybe Marcus Valdez is more of the example leader. That's kind of like, okay, he's going to quietly do his job and, make plays, but Woodbay is going to be out there kind of talking his stuff and, getting the defense to get motivated and play really well.
All right, Mitch, we're going to wrap up our conversation now. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. Like I said, I'll be having my 3 stars article come out in the next few days. I was going to try to do this for the last game, but just kind of ran out of time, unfortunately. But now that we have a really good Phil Jurkovec game, I'm going to really try to dive into the tape for that game and put out an article that kind of analyzes his throws, the plays that he's being asked to execute and how well he's executing them.
And before you go, what was worse? You put it on Twitter, the Pittsburgh Steelers game on Sunday or the BC game in 2015 against Rams?
I haven't decided. I'm still licking my wounds from that mess of a game, if you want to call it that.
All right, Mitch. Well, thank you for joining us. In a moment, I'm going to talk to you about all the other games this weekend, including 2 hockey games and 2 basketball games as BC basketball improves to 3-0. All right, listen up, folks. Have you heard about Built Bar? If you have not done so already, you need to check out the Built Bar. They're my favorite treat that I have at least once a day. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It's 100% covered in chocolate, and it is delicious. Every day around 2:30, I have a Built Bar. I have a whole stash in my garage. One for me, one for the missus that we enjoy every day. Built Bar has some delicious flavors that you can't miss on, including raspberry, mint brownie, coconut almond, coconut, salted caramel, double chocolate, and cherry barcia. And when you taste these, most protein bars, I'm telling you, they taste like wax. They're not fun to eat. They're just they're a chore to get through. Not that way with the Built Bar. They are nice and easy to chew, and they are so delicious. When you head over to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black. For our first 2 segments, we talked exclusively about BC football, but there were a lot of other games. It was a huge weekend for Boston College athletics. Boston College men's basketball played 2 games this weekend, starting with a Friday night tilt against historic rival Holy Cross in the 133rd edition of this series, one that Holy Cross still has the edge on. Boston College won 85-55. Now, if you're looking for BC to dominate a game from start to finish, this was the game to watch. DeMar Langford had a career-high 20 points. Quinton posted well. It was just an all-around great team effort. The defense was nasty. They were holding Holy Cross to a low shooting percentage. It was exactly what you want to see out of BC. How many years under Boston College have we watched Jim Christian, Steve Donahue struggle against these lower conference teams, whether it's losing to UMass Lowell, losing to Bryant, losing to IUPUI or Uipui or whatever they were called. I mean, these are all games that these last 2 coaches have lost. For Boston College to go out there and just absolutely lay the hammer on a team like Holy Cross, that's exactly what you want to see. Now, is that going to translate to ACC play? Probably not this year, but what it does show is that Earl Grant has this team prepared. He has them doing all the right things, and they're prepared to win these games that they should win. Because you look around the ACC, you have teams losing out of conference games already. I mean, Louisville lost to Wofford. I know Wofford is a semi-regular tournament member, but they're still a lower conference team. And you've got other teams losing to other smaller conference teams. It happens. So when BC goes out and wins by 30, you should feel happy because this is a team that going into the season, there wasn't high expectations. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they lost a game like this, but they didn't. They're playing good defense. They're playing sound fundamentals, and they won. Now, they played 2 games. They played on Sunday as well, a game that they won by 10 against Fairfield. There were some issues that popped up in this game I think that we'll have to keep an eye on, specifically free throw shooting, where they scored 57% from the field. That's an issue. They also turned the ball over 17 times, I believe it was. That's an issue. However, they were in control of this game from the beginning to end. They won. Good. Move on. They won by 8, I think, against Fairfield. Now, they play against URI on Wednesday. This will be a game I'm going to preview with Dave Ascoli, who used to write for a blog called Rhody Rampage, but he's the biggest URI supporter I know. He can tell you everything about the Rhode Island Rams. I'm excited to have him on. He's my buddy. I was best man in his wedding. He was in my wedding. You'll get to hear him on tomorrow's show. I hope you enjoy that. On Wednesday's show. Also in the sports world, men's hockey, had 2 games this weekend. They won one against UConn on Saturday on the road in the ice rink, and lost to UMass Lowell at the Songus Arena on Saturday. I didn't really get to check out either of these games because I was too busy with basketball and football coverage. But again, BC hockey, they're not doing so hot. They really need to start to string together some wins to push themselves into that elite stratosphere that we're used to. They were 18th going into this weekend. They're probably going to stay 18th after this weekend. Probably could drop a little bit, but they need to start pulling together some wins. They're not playing very consistent right now. And finally, women's basketball defeated Holy Cross as well over the weekend in a nice game for the women, winning 75-50. Taylor Soule had 21 points again, 14 in the first half, shooting 9 for 11. She is on track to be an all ACC player. Good game all around. Cam Schwartz had 8 points, and Allie Van Timmeren had 10. So BC women's basketball is now 2-0, and they will face off on Wednesday against crosstown rivals BU. So good luck to the women as they face off then. Now on tomorrow's show, we're going to talk more about college football games from around the country with Mitch Wolfe. We'll get into all the news from around the country and news around BC football, because there'll be a lot of it, I'm sure. This is AJ Black. Thank you all for listening. If you have not done so already, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube or give us a 5-star review on Apple. And if you're a real big fan, do both. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you all again soon. Take care, everyone.